Okay, good morning everybody from London and welcome to the latest edition of the Blue Thread. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to do a debrief on Singapore International Water Week, which took place in June, about a month ago now, and we've got three people who were there, present and active. I think I'm correct in saying it's the largest sort of global water event in the APAC region. And because of the subject matter and the guests that we have, we sort of decided to move to a new format, which is more of a round table than our usual sort of presentations followed by questions. But we still want questions, so please type any questions into the chat and we'll try to get to them. So introductions, first of all, as I said, welcome from London. I'm Mark Smith. I'm the Water Sector Director for RSK and I'm the host of the Blue Thread. So before we get any further, let's deal with some housekeeping. So your microphones are muted, and if you do want to engage in the conversation, which we encourage you to do so, please just type some questions into the chat, into the questions bit, and we'll pick them up, and I'll pick them up, and I'll ask I'll bring them into the conversation. We also have got we're on social media, so please use the hashtags in terms of LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter and whatever else we can do. And we'll have the conversation will last about an hour, and we'll then afterwards, at the end of it, I think you will be given a form which I hope you will fill out and to help us improve the Blue Thread, decide what conversations are going to happen going forward. And also it's the whole transcript is then, or the whole sort of recording is put on YouTube. On the Blue Thread channel, and is available over, for you to use or to circulate to your colleagues. Right. So, without any further introduction, really, I think without any more ado, I will go straight to my introduction. So, Singapore International Water Week is, as I said, is the premier water event in the region. And when it's the region, it's APAC really, so Asia Pacific, Australia as well. And it is a biennial event, so it's on every 2 years. There's a smaller event in between in the intervening year. But 2024 was the 10th edition. And it does claim to be the most influential one in Asia. And I think it was actually, to be honest, in 2024. I was there a couple of years ago, 2022, which was the first one post-pandemic. It's a bit slow, a bit less energy, but I think this time it really was a massive event. It's held over 4 days. And it is at the Marina Bay Sands Exhibition Centre in Singapore, and anyone who's been there, you know the Marina Bay Sands is the famous hotel with the boat on top of the 3 towers. It's an amazing place actually. And as I said, it's a big event, and this year was even bigger because it was combined with the Clean Enviro Summit Singapore. So there was, I don't know, 20,000 people, I think, 25,000 people there. And the themes really were extremely global as well. So Singapore is very good at projecting its own approach into the global issues. So they're talking about things like climate mitigation, water sustainability, adaptation, digitalization, of course, very important, and water quality. And there was some emphasis on things that were very, very pertinent, pertinent in Singapore, such as seawater rise, flood protection. So I was delighted to attend again. I'm privileged to be there, and I was at the opening where Minister Grace Fu, who's the Environment Minister of Singapore, she opened the event with, really, really interesting presentation. And what's the first thing that strikes you is that the ministers and the politicians in Singapore really understand the environment. They understand climate change. They get it. It's not just a script. It's really, really important to them. And she was mentioning the importance of keeping the 1.5 degree rise in mind as the world moves toward net zero. How important this is to Singapore. She mentioned the importance of getting to, of being energy dependent and renewable energy. She talked about floating solar. In fact, she launched a second 55 megawatt solar farm tender on I think it's the Pandan Reservoir, follow on from the first phase. She also spoke quite well about energy from waste, and she launched a request for information for alternatives to incineration for waste to improve recycling and how they extract more value from the waste, because obviously within Singapore they have limited ability to sort of recirculate and recycle. So waste is a big issue. Landfill is a big issue out there. And then later that evening, I went to a banquet, and the president of Singapore, I think it's Mr. Tharman Shanmugar-Atnan. So apologies if I've made a mess of that. But the president of Singapore himself presented the Lee Kuan Yew Water Prize to the 2024 laureate, who is Professor Gertan Medema from Netherlands, for his work in the field of wastewater-based epidemiology for virus detection during the COVID-19 pandemic. So the whole event really raised high level, very important, very political, and I think what really impressed me and struck a lot of people I spoke to was that during the Q&A session, which the president did, he was so able to engage in that environmental conversation. And he was repeating the challenges of net zero, renewable energy, waste management, and he also discussed the threat of rising sea levels for the future of Singapore in terms of flooding, but also an existential problem. So you sort of get the feeling that they really get it politically, and that sort of set the scene for the whole week. And then, of course, it was hard, down to sort of the usual thing of visiting trade booths and attending some of the excellent sessions across the different subject areas. And I think it's something we'll try and touch on the next hour or so. It's massive, and the only problems I encountered really was time, just time to do all this stuff, energy, and of course jet lag, which is a bit difficult. I found it difficult this time. So hopefully, I think that gives you the flavour of the event, for which RSK really is very proud to be a founding member of. And I think this morning I've got three guests. Can we bring the guests into onto the camera, please? Who are all there in different guises to discuss their own viewpoint of what Singapore Water Week means to them and what they've got from it. Because quite often you go and you sort of do your thing, and then you go home and you forget about it again. You do your next thing, you go to the next event. And something that we're trying hard to try and say is, right, well, what do we get from it? How does that help us in our day-to-day work? So first of all, we've got people from all over the world here. So I'm in London. Lucy, so first of all, from North Queensland in Australia, even though she's not from North Queensland. I think she's from Manchester somewhere, but she's in North Queensland. Lucy Thomas. So hi, Lucy. And Lucy is both the RSK Chief Scientist, and also she is the Director for the RSK Africa operations. And she is a chartered geologist and a specialist in land condition, particularly in delivering sustainable risk-based remedial solutions for land and water pollution. So welcome, Lucy, and thanks for joining us. And secondly, we have Mel. So from Melanie Go, who is in Singapore. And Mel is from the UK Department of Business and Trade, and she is the Trade and Investment Manager in Clean Growth and Infrastructure based in Singapore. Delighted to have you with us, Mel. And your role really, I think, is a little bit different to perhaps the others. You really work with stakeholders from the UK and the public-private sectors in Singapore to unlock commercial opportunities. So something that I think is so intrinsic to Singapore Water Week, that commercial side of things. So I'd be looking forward to discuss that. And lastly, of course, not least, we have Tony Lau from Hong Kong, and Tony is the Director of Projects at Binny's Hong Kong, and we're delighted to have him with us. Tony is a bit more old-fashioned. Tony, chartered civil engineer, over 20 years experience and expertise in underground assets and rehabilitation. He's also, I've been told, the current chair of the China-Hong Kong Society of Trenchless Technology. So welcome to you, Tony, as well. So we have expertise here above and below ground, design, rehabilitation, and in commercial wheeler dealering. So we have all the skills that they try to pull together in Singapore Water Week. And I think we could sort of start off. And for me, I guess one of the highlights of the week, well, there's two things really. I think the first one is the scale of the challenge. When you go to Singapore, you see they get it, right? Okay, when the president talks, without notes for half an hour about the environmental challenges that Singapore has, you know that it's important. And yet, even though the challenge is high, I thought the energy in the event, the whole energy around the event was really, really high. Too often I've been to many conferences, water conferences, seem dull, conservative, and I really felt this was different. So it seemed as though the challenge was big. People wanted to rise to the challenge. And I guess really, Mel, maybe I can come to you first about that whole thing about how important Singapore and the Asian region is to the UK business, and also how important Singapore International Water Week is as well. And maybe you can talk a little bit about being local there, about the importance of climate change to people there, and then we'll bring others in. So Mel.
Great, thank you so much, Mark. And hello, everyone. Mark has already kindly done an introduction for me. So I'm Mel. I work for the UK's Department for Business and Trade, based in Singapore. I cover infrastructure and clean growth, and of course, one of the biggest sectors under that big umbrella would be water. So for me, Singapore is obviously a very big trading partner for the UK. Just last year, our ex-prime ministers for both the UK and Singapore signed the Singapore and UK strategic partnership on the backdrop of the G20 summit in India. And one of the pillars under the strategic partnership is the climate sustainability, green economy, and energy pillar. It's a mouthful. And what that means is our countries are committed to working in these areas. Particularly, we have the green economy framework that Singapore and the UK has signed a few years ago as well, where we agreed to work together on areas like low carbon energy, green transport, and carbon markets. And of course, there are so many other areas that Singapore and the UK look to work together on as well, especially water. We know that PUB is a very important stakeholder as well. And the PUB actually, from Singapore side, they have been allocated $125 million to run the Coastal Protection and Flood Management Research Program, which you can see just how important the water agenda is on Singapore's radar at the moment. It's not just about clean water anymore, having safe drinking clean water in Singapore, but also on how do you manage flood resilience, flood defense in Singapore. And interestingly enough, Singapore and the UK, we have the same issues. We're essentially a rock surrounded by water. So we have a lot that we can talk about with Singapore. We have a lot of expertise that we can share with Singapore. In the UK, you've done this for many, many years. There are many different solutions that you've developed that we can also explore on how we can use in Singapore as well. And in fact, Singapore is a very important trading partner for the UK. So Singapore is one of the UK's closest and most dynamic partners in the region, with £21 billion worth of trade relationship, accounting for 40% of our total trade with Southeast Asia. So with Singapore, of course, we're looking more towards flood defense issues now. How can we work towards that? And of course, regionally, a lot of companies will be looking to set up hub in Singapore. And then in the region, you'll be looking at issues of still safe and clean drinking water, still a very big priority in markets like Philippines and Indonesia as well. So yeah, that's a big overview of our trading relationship with Singapore, why Singapore International Water Week is so important for us, because it attracts all the regional players, Asia, and of course globally as well. And how can we use events like that to attract the UK supply chain to export into this part of the world?
Okay, so thanks, Mel. So I like that description of a rock surrounded by water, but I guess Lucy's on a bigger rock surrounded by water, slightly bigger. Really. So Lucy, I mean, what were the highlights of the week for you? Just trying to capture the main things that sort of spring to mind.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Great to be here today. I think for me, it's one of the few conferences that really is truly global. It's attended by government, water companies, industry, and academia, and not just from one country or even one region, but there were people from the US, Africa, Australia, as well as the APAC region, and of course Europe. So I think that really helps with the knowledge exchange and the exchange of ideas, particularly as we're dealing with a huge topic of water and climate combined. I think some of the key things for me were the opening session, which is very grand. It's quite exciting to be part of in the audience. And there's clearly some high-level speakers, including Minister Grace Fu that Mark mentioned earlier. A couple of key points there from me, we're putting people at the centre of the climate debate, because ultimately it's us people that will solve it through digitalisation or getting people on board and driving change and behaviour. And then an interesting one specifically to net zero was carbon measurement during contracts drives innovation. So we had in the past safety and the drives to innovation and improving safety, whereas now it's sort of looking at, you know, the next evolution of that into as we all move towards net zero.
No, I mean, you know, Lisa, you've gone to lots of different conferences around, and what would you say the same thing that I was thinking, that there was a lot of energy there, even though the challenge was great? And I think the thing that Singapore Water Week does very well is bring people from different sectors together. You know, it's not just water people talking about water. Goodness, we're good at that. We can do that for a long time. But I don't know, what do you think? Because you still come at it from it. You're not a traditional water sort of professional, are you? So.
No, groundwater and pollution, fine, but not water supply or wastewater treatment and recycling, which is you know, clearly part of the key topics discussed. I think there is huge energy. You know, it's Singapore. Everyone wants to be there. They have very, you know, there's a lot of different thematic rooms that you can attend, as well as the big plenary sessions. And it's also the only event that I've been to where they make a real thing about the poster presentation sessions. Having been a couple of years ago when Mark previously went as well after COVID, you know, that was, everybody was excited because it was a face-to-face event again, but it didn't quite have the same level of attendees, particularly globally, because of the travel challenges at the time. And I think the main difference for me this year was the number of real life examples being shared. So previously at this and other events, we've been talking about how we might reach net zero, whereas this time there were sort of some tangible examples, be it floating or nature-based solutions, recycled water, treated water, etc. So I think we'll come into some of those later in the discussion, but really seeing some of those examples being shared honestly as well, you know, with the things that went well and the things that were challenging to deliver on them.
So, I mean, that's quite interesting. Maybe Tony, you could comment. You know, I mean, first of all, you know, I'd be very interested in the highlights of the week, but also the fact that a lot of what we heard was case studies. It wasn't just theory. A lot of it was about, you know, case studies that had happened, things that went right, things that went wrong. But first of all, maybe, you know, from your point of view, what were the highlights, and then we can move on to some of the case studies.
Okay, thank you. Just concur with all of you that it is a very big event. In fact, it is my first time to join the SIWW. And it's great to see that the people from different aspects, from the government, water companies, many sectors also join to share their experience and knowledge in this event. And it also touched on many hot topics that all the challenges we are also facing. For example, the non-revenue water, the coastal protection, climate change, and everything that is really what we have been doing and what we are trying to solving and the client issue. And in fact, Singapore is a lot like Hong Kong. We also share a lot of the same problem. For example, we also have the water supply. We also need to rely on for us from China and Singapore from Malaysia. And also we are also the coastal city. Is also we have a challenge to, against the climate change and the coastal protection. So in this event, there are a lot of things I can share and a lot of experience I can learn from the real case studies. And also one more highlight is that besides there are a lot of parallel section and also many panelist discussion, the exhibition hall that's also a lot of networking with different suppliers and also other water companies, and they have a lot of new products. For example, on many changes technologies, that we have seen a lot of pipe rehabilitation and also new changes technologies that have been evolving, and is also what we've been doing in our daily work in Hong Kong. So it is a very fruitful event for me to come to this SIWW.
So what were the breakthrough innovations that caught your eye, Tony? You know, either at the exhibition or, you know, because I know you spent time on the, you know, on the RSK booth, but also maybe in the poster papers. I mean, was there anything particular that you found would be of real, you know, was of real interest, or something that you had heard of or not heard of, or something new that you came across?
In fact, there are quite some. It is, although it may not be a drastic big change, but there are some maybe some minor variation of the previous one. For example, some of the rehabilitation works, there are some different minor, different curing method. Although they're very similar things, but they do able to solve a lot of problems that in our conventional method. And also, of course, I also see a lot of treatment technologies, some membrane technologies, supplies in the booth. If Lucy and Mike, you can imagine that there are a lot of them in the booth. There are a lot of tube of the RO membrane that they're selling. Of course, all of them have different performance specification, and then also some water monitoring. And I think the water monitoring, the real-time water monitoring, is something that we're looking at, because I think around the world is more concerned on the water quality of the water in the water supply network. So the real-time water quality monitoring is and there are some very handy water quality monitoring device that can be easily installed in the supply network. It is a product that I think quite very amazing to me.
Okay, yeah. I mean, what about you, Lucy? Was there anything particularly that you saw that was of interest, that perhaps we could apply, in your role in, within RSK in Africa? Or because I know there's a lot of Australian technologies were there. There's a lot of different innovations in Australia as well, which I thought was interesting, because they come at it from a sort of much bigger scale, in terms of innovation, in terms of the irrigation, or what have you. So what was there that caught your eye, Lucy?
Yeah. I think, well, there were a few key things really. So there was the digital data exchanges, to sort of help improve and share knowledge from smart metering, that we can really start to change behaviour and drive efficiencies. I was actually a posted judge. That was part of my contribution to the event.
How many posters did you have to judge?
Fortunately, only about 8, because there were literally hundreds. So there must have been a lot of judges. But it was really fun, because you sort of, because you're judging them, obviously you engage perhaps more than you might otherwise. But there were a lot of people, and it was a really good session. But during one of those, I didn't know much about hydrogen. It's the buzzword. It's the way forward with energy, and as we all hear. But actually, one thing I learned there was the extra demand there will be on water, because to produce about 1 kilogram of hydrogen, you need at least 10 litres of water. So, in addition to all the other challenges we've got providing enough water, if we go down that route, that's going to add to our challenges. And I can see Mel nodding vigorously. And then I suppose in terms of Australia, there's the Wamarran Valley example, which is Unity Water in Australia. They had the challenge around not, having growing population, and also increased challenge for water demands from the farming side of things. So after a huge amount of stakeholder engagement, they came up with a solution to use recycled water from the waste treatment works, which obviously, is then treated, but not necessarily to the same level. And it's used to provide a reliable water resource with nutrients to farmers that need it to grow fruit and turf. So it gives those farmers, I suppose, sufficient sort of knowledge and reliability in resource of water that they can then expand their farms. That then allows them to employ additional people. Those people spend more in the local communities. And a key part of their employment is actually from the island communities. So that helps also with the sort of reducing inequalities as well. So that was a really good win-win example for me. Okay.
And I think, Mel, I know you were involved with the British Water Exhibition stand, and you also did a seminar on innovative technologies that I was pleased to be part of. I mean, was there much of interest that you saw? I think I'm also interested in your opinion as to whether or not the UK takes best advantage that it can of Singapore Water Week, because I didn't think there was the British Water stand was there and was good, and there was some good technologies there, but there wasn't a huge British presence. There was a lot more from the continent, from Europe, and there was an awful lot from America, of course, as well as Australia. What do you think? And I guess overall then, have you some thoughts about the commercial side of the conference, which is something that perhaps a lot of people don't think about?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Mark. And So obviously, Singapore International Water Week aims to highlight all of the different opportunities and challenges in the water sector, and how can we work towards, capitalizing on those opportunities, especially. And what we've realized is, we did a lot of campaigning actually. I think if in an ideal situation, we would have wanted to feature a few more companies on our pavilion. But I think Singapore International Water Week was also quite illuminating for us in terms of understanding that our own supply chain, the UK supply chain, doesn't seem to be particularly robust in certain areas, and it's highlighted that actually our UK supply chain is now very heavy on advisory. So you would see again many of the civil engineering firms like Ara, Mott MacDonald, Mace being involved. But again, a lot of our strengths seem to have moved towards the professional services side on advisory, pre-feasibility, instead of the bulk of the projects where you would see many other companies playing in that space. So in terms of competition also, we've seen so many countries putting up huge stands. You see the Netherlands, you see the Australians, China, of course, Korea, Taiwan. So yeah, so in terms of competition and our own supply chain, obviously there are many big opportunities to capitalize on, but it's also just been quite interesting for us to see that our own supply chain doesn't necessarily have a complete offer, which in an ideal world we would have liked to be able to capitalize on those opportunities. But yeah, I mean, for us here in DBT, here in Singapore, obviously our job is to help make sure that if you're a company in the UK and you want to export to this area of the world, we're able to help support you, understand your challenges, where would you like us to play, because we're government, so we don't make or sell anything, but what we can do is we can capitalize on the relationships that we have with, let's say, government or agencies to help unlock certain barriers or market access issues, so we can help lobby for you, and stand on your side essentially to help you unlock commercial opportunities to do business in this part of the world.
Okay, and I guess essentially it's not just Singapore you deal with; it's the whole region, isn't it, Mel? Yeah.
For sure.
So it's the whole of Southeast Asia, right?
Yeah, so our patch would include Japan at the top, all the way down to New Zealand at the bottom. So that's about 15 countries. Obviously, our focus on infrastructure would be a lot heavier in Southeast Asia, because that's where the growing demand is. China and Hong Kong would be a different patch for us, just because those are huge markets as well on their own. So we have another trade commissioner who will be looking after those areas, and of course South Asia with India and Bangladesh. Those would be other key markets as well, who will be looked after by another trade commissioner. But our patch is already huge and sprawling with about 15 countries inside, and obviously our focus is heavy on Southeast Asia.
Okay. So I mean, Tony, thinking of supply chain, you're based in Hong Kong there, and you do a lot of work in Hong Kong. Where do you find that a lot of the supply chain that you guys dip into comes from? Is it right across the whole region? Is it more American? Is it where's your core supply chain from? And was that present at Singapore International Water Week?
Yeah, of course, we have a lot of some niche technology, some, for example, the RO membrane. Of course, they come from different parts of the world. Our European country, Israel, we do a lot of technical visit to their plant to see how they work. But of course, we are now in Hong Kong. We are now more and more rely on something from China, from mainland China, because they're one of the largest manufacturers in the world, of course, nowadays. And we still need to have a lot of things to be new technology to try to have shared experience from our part of the world. And in this conference, I will see you can maybe China, there's a part of them, a lot of China suppliers and also companies here, but we can see also a lot of other companies from other parts of the world. In particular, I recall I have a chat, a long discussion on the booth from the German, and for which the German is one of the the lighting technology, one of the top technology around the world. So I have a lot of discussion with them about what their new product are, and we have some problem in Hong Kong and the current relining and transit technology, whether they have new solution. So there are a lot of things that I've learned, and a lot of connection I can get from this SIWW for my work.
Okay, and I guess the other thing that was sort of fairly obvious when I was walking around talking to people was the whole idea of sustainable water management, and sustainable water management practices, I guess, really, you know, because a lot of what you hear at Singapore Water Week is case study based. It's about things that have happened or things that are planned. And I know that both, you know, the president of Singapore and Minister Fu, as well as the CEO of PUB, they talked about circular solutions, the importance of circular solutions, and I think, is that something that is really embedded locally, Melanie? You know, the idea of the circular economy, the importance of renewable energy, because quite often PUB, you know, the Public Utilities Board, which is the Singapore Water Board, I mean, they project themselves internationally as being ahead of the game, and I think it's fair to say they usually are. So how important is the circular economy, circular solutions locally?
Oh, my camera went off there for a second. Yeah, the circular economy, obviously something that Singapore is also looking to implement more of as well. I think there's a growing sense, especially in like Southeast Asia, as we develop, and obviously with many new developing cities, it's important to get it right from the start. So concepts like circular economy will be important to implement in a growing city. And in Singapore, I would say, yeah, as mentioned by Minister Fu during her opening remarks, they're obviously looking at a lot more innovative technology to ensure that because we're running out of space in our landfill. So yeah, technology in the circular economy obviously very important for us, and even for our session as well. A few weeks ago, actually, at another event, because June was a crazy month, at the Asia Infrastructure Forum, we had the honor of hosting a circularity session as well, to explore different best practices that we have in the UK supply chain, from design all the way to civil engineering. How can we incorporate circular economy every step of the way? So yeah, I would say it's very high up on the agenda as well. And I think Singapore also is starting to see that traditionally we're a very conservative market, so we don't like to go first. We like to see how everyone takes on the new technology first, and then, oh, it didn't really work out for them, so thank God we didn't go try that. But I think also as we move along, as we try to establish ourselves as a market leader in sustainability, and obviously having the mandate to hit our net zero goals by 2050, I think Singapore has an increasing appetite to be an accelerator and a hub for research in circular economy and new innovative technologies in sustainability.
So I think the sustainability, I know that's close to heart, Lucy. And we talk a lot about sustainability, and sometimes I sort of think we forget what we're trying to do, you know, because we're all trying to be so sustainable. And I think we use different words like circular economy, sustainability, and what have you. Did you feel that the conference was had sustainability really at its core, Lucy? Because that is something that the water sector is starting to embrace, but I think it's fair to say was not a leader in it. So.
Oh, that's a tricky one. I think certainly for the net zero, they're all over that side of it. So the carbon and the emissions part of environment. I still think biodiversity could be more. So obviously it was the first year that the coastal resilience session was held, and perhaps as that evolves, there will be more and more coming through on the nature-based solutions side there. The social side was brought in more, on the example I mentioned earlier, for example. So the sort of people part, and the finances was brought in, particularly in the very early session, which explained you know, sort of we've got the money, but it's not necessarily in the right places, and it explained how much is being spent on loss and damage. So I think it is at the heart, but whether we're thinking holistically enough and we're getting enough cross-sector collaboration, you know, it's more than we've had before, for sure. But if we're truly going to get circular economy working, there has to be more and more cross-sector collaboration, you know, to find uses for equipment, to be able to reuse or upcycle it, etc.
Okay. So, I mean, Tony, I guess that's the challenge to engineers like yourself and myself, really, is to sort of embrace that circular approach to everything we do. I mean, did you feel as a sort of an urban engineer, if I can use that phrase, did you feel that there was new ways of thinking with regard to it? Because in terms of particularly reuse, upcycling of equipment, rather than, you know, bring in new stuff, more pumps, more pipes, more this. So did you see a softer approach as you were going around the exhibition?
Yeah. I think that we have been talking about sustainability for decades, I think, and now it's come to a circular economy. And for the time being, a lot of things is working on to how to enhance the sustainability of, for example, our many our project, the revitalization and also rehabilitation. But however, I think in this conference we see, for example, in Singapore and other parts of the world, there are a lot of more structural and more systematic way for us to, for example, the carbon audit. It have been a lot have been carrying out, you know, many parts of the world, and we as an urban, many designers and also some pipeline and also any civil infrastructure, I think we need to implement it and in a more systematic way. For example, from the government official and from it is they need to have a more strong initiatives for the public and also from the designer to have a more systematic and a quantitative way to do the sustainability and also circular economy.
Okay, I mean, I think it's quite interesting actually that at the event, I think also the World Bank and Singapore had a launch of Singapore Water Centre, which I think was sort of done. I think Minister Fu announced it right at the very start, actually. But I thought that was really interesting because, you know, it was about the World Bank essentially saying Singapore is going to be the center of the water sector, not just Singapore, but within Asia. I guess, Mel, that'll sort of open up other opportunities for British companies, other international companies, because having the World Bank sort of saying or Singapore Water Centre is at the heart of our offering. I mean, is that something that you'd be looking to explore more going forward?
For sure. I mean, multilateral organizations like the World Bank and ADB are partners that we like working with, we really love working with, also because the UK is a donor as well. So it's in our interest to explore how we can help extract these best practices and share it with like-minded partners and our stakeholders as well in the region. And of course, with Singapore and the World Bank starting the I'm sorry, I can't remember the name. Water Centre? Did you say, Mark?
Yeah, Singapore Water. I mean, I think it's called
Singapore Water Centre. Yeah, and the UK was an integral part in Singapore's water story. We just celebrated Benin's 100 years in Singapore. So I'm sure a lot of the experience and expertise that the water centre is looking to share with the region and the rest of the world, a lot of it would include UK expertise actually. So we're keen to understand how we can work closer with the World Bank on exploring best practices and how they would be utilizing the water center to communicate with stakeholders, because we would have the same stakeholders. It would be the water boards and utility companies in the region as well, and how we can make use of the water center to also bring in the best of UK supply chain to help work on different opportunities and solve different issues, which I'm sure a lot of it would have been issues that the UK and Singapore have faced in our own water stories over the years.
Yeah, I think the ability of PUB and Singapore to actually put themselves at the center of the solution is really, really impressive, actually.
Yeah.
I think it is a unique place when you visit it, because it is high energy. It is sort of, it's Singapore, right? Everybody, but I think they have an ability, because they are aligned politically, you know, the PUB, the government, the commercial side stuff just seems to all work together. I haven't really seen it anywhere else. I mean, maybe it's similar in Hong Kong, Tony, because I guess you have a city nation or city state or a city, you know, that actually has to be aligned, because if you don't get it right, you know, with rising sea levels, with flooding, with, you know, with the whole sort of climate change, I think you have to have an alignment that perhaps we haven't done in the UK very well. I don't know, what do you think, Tony?
Yeah, I see the alignment, just as Mark, you mentioned, alignment of the different sectors and the government official in Singapore. But something more amazing to me is that at least on the water weeks, just as Mark mentioned, the government also know very well about the problem. They are not just the politician; they exactly know the technical people, to have the technical know-how, and of course maybe in Singapore. Because although it is similar, but the water issue, for example, the water scarcity, the potable water is also very important. It's not just technical problem; it's also a political problem to them. So you have a lot of policy, and the politicians have a lot of policy that's focused on the water part. So in Hong Kong, at least our potable water is less critical, but but anyhow is all critical in all parts of the world because of the scarcity of the clean water. But yes, Mark, your message about right is about for example, the climate change and the flood protection. I think I'm not sure about UK, but at least in this Asia region, the climate change and the adverse weather we experience that is getting worse. So a lot of infrastructure and a lot of policy have been making to try to how to cope with that. And we see that very drastic in just a few years time. It has changed a lot about the rainfall intensity or so. So a lot of infrastructure and a lot of planning have been doing to how to cope with that. And for example, we have some artificial island. Is of course it will be really susceptible to any climate change and also the coastal protection and adverse weather. So there's something of the design standard, the old design, that we have to reconsider about what kind of standard we are going to adopt for the new infrastructure in Hong Kong.
I think to be fair, Tony, in the UK we are at the point, and I know we've just had a change of government, okay, so I've got to be a little bit, things may well change here, and I'm sure but we are still at the point of thinking climate change is important to us, but it's not critical. Whereas when I was in Singapore and when I visited you guys in Hong Kong, climate change is here and now. It's there. I mean, what's it like in Australia, Lucy? I mean, because you know, you mentioned perhaps there wasn't as much as you would have liked to have seen in biodiversity at Singapore International Water Week. I think that's a fair comment. But I know that Singapore as a city state really embraces biodiversity. You just got to go to the Botanic Gardens and you see that. Perhaps that's the next step. But coming out of from living in Australia, it's different, because the one thing you have in Australia is lots of land, of course. So I don't know. Can you contrast
and
that?
then we have the same challenge. We don't always have water where we need it, or when.
And I guess also you work in Africa quite a bit, obviously. So I think there's a different angle to come in there as well, isn't there?
Well, I was actually driving back from Cairns the other week, and just to show that my water knowledge is improving and I'm taking things in as I'm now driving, I was looking at the curbside, and they had these huge gaps because of the intense storms that we have, where, you know, like in Europe or the UK, we have quite small drainage holes or drain covers. This was like a huge gap in the curb where the water literally just goes over the side into a big spillway. And I was like, oh, maybe we need more of those in Africa, because Africa also is definitely seeing the effects of climate change. You know, we've had really intense storms in Tanzania this year and Kenya, and we've also had no water in Dar es Salaam offices. So we're certainly seeing the same effects there. And I think that's one thing just to bring in, whilst Singapore is very much around, new solutions, digitalization, we also need to remember there's a huge proportion of people in the world that don't even have access to clean water yet. So whilst, we're all trying to save water and try and improve what we do already, there's still going to be a huge demand for other people to have clean up water in the future.
I think, it's really interesting because when we met the PUB CEO, Mr. Rong, he mentioned two things that were utterly critical. One was rising seawater levels, okay, and the importance of flood defences not being what he called hard or grey, and probably not being soft and green, but being a mixture. And I think that's a challenge for us engineers, really, is how do we have the concrete but also have the biodiversity? That's interesting. The second thing he mentioned that is going to be a really important part going future is digitalization. And I guess these days you can't talk about anything without talking about digitalization and AI, etc. I don't know, Tony, do you have any thoughts around that? Did you find that the whole 3 or 4 days you spent talking about AI and digitalization?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the digital water, the digitalization is also growing, is a very hot topic now, and it has a lot of parallel section in the SIWW Water Weeks that has mentioned about that. And of course, first of all, is about the design standard, and also about, I think technically, we do have a lot of technical solutions to doing the digital water. We have a lot of sensor and we have a lot of software to do that. But then is how about the standard and how about the investment for doing the digital water? It is something, it is easier said than done. In fact, for example, you have needed the digital water in the supply network. We need to install a lot of hardware, a lot of infrastructure is to be done. And is very difficult, in particular when you have just already developed cities, that when you need to install this kind of hardware. So we are working on that, and we are of course we're trying hard to we need to build some necessary infrastructure for that. It will be easy for the new structure for do the digitalization and the AI. But for the existing system, we still face a lot of challenges. For example, the inaccurate record and also the difficulty for the infrastructure. So this is some of the challenge for us to have a holistically digital water for the whole network. Is something that we are working on that, and is something that the client is also looking for our solution.
And do you see that, Tony, as being integral going forward? That's something that's absolutely critical, because I think there's a lot of people who still think digital is slightly in the distance, in the future. But you're saying in Hong Kong, in your day-to-day, and what you saw at Singapore Water Week, it is here and now. It's critical now. Yes.
I think so, because nowadays all the assets manager, I think their dream will be that sitting at their office table, and then they can look at all the assets, knowing the condition, and even have the AI to foresee where would there be a problem for their prevention. So I think we are moving one more step ahead forward, is that we need to get the digitalization and AI things to, rather than we just need to go to the site and do the physical inspection assessment. So and physical measurement. So it is a trend. And also, of course, it is a lacking of the working resource, the resources, the labor, everything with the digitalization. It can also significantly save the manpower input. And in fact, at the end of the day, we also save the maintenance and operation costs as well. So I think it is a hot topic, and I think that every asset manager looking forward for that.
And is that something, Mel, that you're seeing more of? Companies that are sort of very digital focused, AI focused, wanting to export out into Singapore, wanting to talk to you guys about getting in there?
Yeah, for sure. Digital is also very high up on the agenda for Singapore. In fact, also the UK and Singapore, we've signed our Singapore's first ever digital economy agreement, actually, where we agreed again to work on like various different issues, especially on the policy side, on how can we encourage more innovation in the digital space. So yeah, digital obviously is something that is very high up on Singapore's agenda, and what Tony mentioned actually, on utilizing AI and other innovative solutions to help with traditional processes is something that we've seen a lot. Also, we've just heard from Nick Smallwood, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the UK's Infrastructure and Project Authority. This is also something that he mentioned when he went over to Hong Kong on how can we utilize digital solutions more in major infrastructure projects. So yeah, and that's something that he shared also with Singapore as well. And yeah, definitely higher up on the agenda. And we will see Singapore again because they understand that they can't really be too conservative anymore. So we'll definitely see a higher uptake of more innovative solutions and usage of AI in many, many, many different sectors, including the water sector.
Yeah, I mean, I did see innovations while I was there, flood resilience or urban designs, which are really important. I think, Lucy, you mentioned that already. The whole concept of sponge city,
Yes.
using sustainable urban drainage systems. There was lots of ideas around that, which is something that we need to embrace in the UK. There was also really good, some really good tech around advanced weather forecasting tools, which I think, Tony, you were talking about extreme weather events, extreme rainfall, extreme flooding, and then how do you get the water off the streets, and how do you then get the water off the streets and not completely pollute the environment, which is a challenge that we have at the moment in the UK with, yes, it rains heavy, yes, we can get it off the streets, but it ends up in the rivers without being treated. So I think these are some challenges that I think were interesting. The weather forecasting tools were presented as critical measures to help us adapt to climate change, but I think they're critical measures that we need today, really. So moving forward, really, in terms of the digitalization as being a niche part of our industry, it's becoming center stage, isn't it? It really is. I mean, are you seeing that, Lucy, not just at Singapore, but in everything you do within RSK? Because I know you have a broad remit across a lot of different projects.
Yeah, for sure. We certainly see it a lot. We see it wanted by clients a lot. We see, people wanting to sell it a lot as well. I think the challenge for most of us that aren't digital is understanding when we really need it and how it will help us. So sort of concentrating more communications around, how some tangible, measurable impacts of the benefits, be it X amount of water saved, X amount of carbon saved, X amount of dollars saved, or whichever currency it happens to be. I know there's a dashboard we use on there's a not a smart metering, a solar powered water metering in rural Africa that we're installing, and that's got a dashboard with it, and that's been in place now for, I think it started about 5 years ago, and it actually tells you sort of how much carbon has been saved. So there are some really good things out there that where digital's really helped, but I think we have to get those stories out to people in a manner that's understandable to those of us that are not digital, me included.
Yeah, which includes me as well, Lucy. And one of the things that I find is the tech is great, but the data is sometimes lagging behind. And
yeah, it reminds me of my modelling days. Rubbish in and rubbish out.
Yeah. Well, we need to perhaps get better at discerning, good data from bad data, because I worry sometimes. Maybe this is going down a rabbit hole. I worry sometimes if we make, we put really advanced AI onto fairly dodgy data sets, we might come up with answers that sound good but actually aren't what we need. But just in conclusion, really, I think there was lots of high tech. There was a big focus on coastal resilience, and I think we could talk about the technologies for another couple of hours. But what I'd like to just finish on is, how do you believe Singapore Water Week really helps with strategic partnerships? I think it's meeting people. We have government there. We have senior people. I know I attended a session with Titans of Industry where Alan Ryder from RSK was on it. But there was also the chief execs of Suez, of Jacobs, of AECOM. I'm probably forgetting some important people here, but whoever. And they were there, as delegates ready to talk to people. So maybe Mel, you could talk a little bit, because this is your job really, getting people to talk to each other, about, you know, strategic partnerships between APAC and UK businesses and government, and are we good at it, and what can we learn from Singapore Water Week?
Wow, that's a big question. No pressure. Yeah, so Singapore National Water Week, of course, yeah, so many different partners. You can see such a huge diverse supply chain there, many different stakeholders. As for Singapore, what can the UK do more? I think we're definitely on the innovation side. How can both of our governments help to support, especially the SMEs now, on dealing with very niche and specific issues, and commercializing on opportunities in Southeast Asia will probably be a big area for both of our governments, and of course for the supply chain. How can we work better with academia, for example? We see that both of our governments are keen to leverage more on academia to spur the research side of many new technologies, and then how can we possibly, as governments, also work better to take these technologies to market and help to accelerate these solutions to take on real commercial issues that are happening in Southeast Asia. And of course, we have so many, again, developing cities. How can we help them get it right from the start without having to go through all of the issues that both of our nations have gone through? Yeah, so I think those are the big areas that we see Singapore and the UK working on.
Okay. And Lucy, I mean, in terms of strategic partnerships, it's very important, obviously, when you work globally, to also have good strategic partnerships. Did you find that there was good practice at Singapore when you were there?
Sure. I mean, it's the level of not just speakers but attendees, you know, across the really wide range of sectors. So, like I said at the beginning, you know, government, industry, water companies, and academia, all, you know, starting those discussions and really moving forward with the collaboration and sharing of ideas. And I think, you know, like you said, the titans of industry and some of the water panels I attended, you know, they're really high level, and you really get some good, useful knowledge about their challenges and how we all need to work together to solve them.
And high level people who were accessible, weren't they? Essentially, it was reasonably easy.
Yeah, very happy to have conversations before, after, one-to-ones, etc., and during the panel discussions as well.
Okay. So I'm guessing we'd all recommend Singapore Water Week. I think we could do. I think we could do with perhaps having that ability to get people around the table from governments, academia, commercial, you know, and have those conversations, because the challenges are huge and the energy needed is enormous. So we're out of time. I'll draw this conversation to an end. I could talk for ages about it, so it's been really, really interesting. It just leaves me just to thank Lucy, Mel, and Tony, and this whole transcript will be available on the BlueTube channel when we're finished. Thank you very much. Have a good day, have a good evening, wherever you are, and thanks again. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.